snow piled up on walls made of bark, wind blowing through leafless trees. Inside the house, flickering firelight illuminated many faces. Families slept shoulder to shoulder on raised platforms, smoke curling up to the ceiling. Outside, the temperature dropped below freezing, while inside, children slept in warmth. This was a longhouse of the Haudenosaunee people in the midst of a freezing winter. This structure was over 200 feet long, housing more than 20 families under a continuous arched roof. For half the year, from mid-October to mid-May, these communities lived indoors to withstand biting cold, deep snow, and endless wind. Architecture was key to their survival. The question was not whether they built shelters, but how they did it. They designed a wooden structure, using only saplings, bark, and rope. The house generated enough warmth for dozens of people, stored food and firewood for 6 months, handled toxic smoke from multiple fires, and maintained fresh air, all without using metal nails, mortar, or modern insulation. The Haudenosaunee called themselves the people of the Longhouse. This name was not metaphorical. The house determined everything: social structure, political alliances, and their survival through winter. To understand how they lived, you first must know how they built. The starting point of the Longhouse was the material. In the old-growth forests of the Northeast, oak and chestnut trees had trunks too large for stone axes to fell efficiently. They were so heavy that work crews struggled to drag them into place. Building with such giant trees would cost months of labor for a single structure. The Haudenosaunee solved this by targeting young regrowth forests. These clearings formed when old trees died or were removed, giving young saplings a chance to compete for sunlight. The result was dense stands of straight, slender saplings, cedar, hickory, and elm, of a size manageable for human harvest. Saplings with diameters of 10 to 20 centimeters could be felled, stripped, and shaped in hours rather than weeks. The material choice was not merely about convenience, because the frame required 2 types of wood with opposite properties. The vertical posts needed rigidity to support the roof's weight without sagging, while the rafters needed flexibility to bend into the characteristic barrel-shaped arch without breaking. Both properties were provided by saplings. Thicker trees were used as posts, while more slender, fresh saplings were bent into arches. The building season was not random. Work was done in late spring to early summer, when sap flowed strongly through the cambium layer just under the bark. This narrow seasonal window offered 2 benefits. 1. Moisture made the saplings supple enough to bend into smooth curves without breaking the wood fibers. 2. And more importantly, the flowing sap allowed builders to harvest large sheets of bark without killing the tree or taking the bark too early. Elm bark was preferred. A mature elm could provide bark sheets 3 feet high and 6 feet long, large enough to cover the main parts of the frame. To minimize joints, the bark harvesting technique required great precision. Workers made vertical incisions down the trunk, then horizontal cuts at the top and bottom. When sap was flowing most strongly, the bark layer easily separated from the sapwood underneath, peeling off into flexible sheets that could be rolled for transport. The house frame was erected in sequential steps. The vertical posts were placed in pairs along 2 parallel lines, 20 feet apart. This spacing became standard, narrow enough to be spanned by available rafters. It was wide enough to accommodate a central aisle 10 feet wide, flanked by 5-foot wide living platforms running along each wall. The pairs of posts were spaced 20 feet apart lengthwise, forming modular bays. Depending on the size of the extended family, these bays can extend the structure up to 30, 60, 100, or even 200 feet. Horizontal beams connect the tops of the post, forming a rectangular frame. Next is a key innovation. Flexible saplings are bent from one side to the other, creating the shape of a rounded arch. This barrel arch design is not just for aesthetics, it is a thermodynamic technique. The entire frame is secured by tying long strips of bark, typically from basswood or hickory, braided into cordage. No nails, wooden pegs, or mortise and tenon joints are used. All connections are made with bark cordage meticulously wound and knotted. This choice seems primitive until you consider environmental forces. Winter causes extreme temperature fluctuations. Wood contracts when cold and expands when warm. The ground freezes and heaves due to ice lenses, then subsides as it thaws in spring. Wind pressure is constantly changing. Rigid joints pegs driven into drilled holes. Notched wood, locked at right angles, crack under repeated stress and fail catastrophically. The lash joints are flexible when wind impacts the structure, and the bark cordage absorbs force by shifting slightly. When frost heaves the ground, the house frame adjusts instead of breaking. The entire building breathes with environmental forces rather than resisting them rigidly. It is this dynamic stability, not static strength, that has allowed longhouses to survive decades of harsh seasonal changes. There are two main lashing techniques: square lashing to secure 90-degree joints, connecting upright posts to horizontal beams. The cord is wrapped in a specific pattern around one post then the other, cinching them together at a 90-degree angle with each turn. Diagonal lashing is used to join poles meeting at various angles, especially cross-bracing that prevents the frame from racking in the wind. Each technique requires an understanding of tension, friction, and the geometry of wrapping, passed down from builder to builder. After the frame is complete, the outer cladding proceeds. Sheets of bark are attached horizontally to the frame, overlapping like shingles. Orientation is key. Bark has natural longitudinal grooves. If placed vertically, these grooves would channel rainwater straight down the wall. When the bark is lashed horizontally, the water flow is deflected. Those grooves lie parallel to the ground. Water hits the outer surface and slides sideways off the structure, not seeping into the gaps. Some builders go further, using a stone adze, a cutting tool with a blade perpendicular to the handle. Before installation, they smooth horizontal grooves on each bark sheet, creating a flatter surface for better water runoff. The final weatherproofing step is lashing a second layer of poles on the outside, directly over the bark cladding. This outer lattice compresses the bark sheets tightly against the inner frame, preventing wind from getting under the edges and peeling off the weather barrier. The result is a three-layer envelope: the inner frame, the bark insulation, and the outer compression lattice. With the walls sealed tight, the structure must confront its central paradox. Fire generates heat, heat sustains life, but fire also produces smoke, and smoke is lethal. A 200-foot longhouse, equal to 61 meters, could house 20 to 30 families, or 60 to 100 people. Cooking, heating, and lighting rely entirely on open fires. A single central hearth is insufficient to warm the entire length of the house. The solution is to place multiple hearths. Each 20-foot bay, about 6 meters, has a fire pit in the central aisle. A 200-foot longhouse could have up to 10 separate fires burning at the same time. 10 fires produce an enormous amount of smoke. Without ventilation, the interior becomes uninhabitable within minutes, turning into a toxic chamber of carbon monoxide and fine particulates. However, ventilation requires creating openings in the roof. Openings let heat escape, yet heat is the main purpose of the house. The Haudenosaunee designed a solution to reconcile these conflicting needs. A smoke hole is cut through the roof above each hearth. The vent is not left open. Instead, a piece of bark is used to seal it. The installation allows for flexible adjustment. It can be propped open, fully opened, tightly closed, nearly closed, or tilted to face the wind. This adjustability is key. When the air is still, the cover is opened fully to let smoke escape while minimizing heat loss. In strong winds or heavy snow, the cover is closed tighter to reduce airflow. This prevents drafts from pushing smoke back into the living area and reduces the loss of precious warm air. Each hearth has a person responsible for controlling its corresponding smoke vent, frequently adjusting its position based on drafts, fire intensity, and outside weather. However, a simple ventilation system alone cannot completely solve the smoke problem. Before escaping through the vents, the smoke must travel somewhere inside the house. By arranging the space vertically, the longhouse turned this weakness into an advantage. The barrel-vaulted roof creates a soaring interior space, up to 20 feet from floor to peak. The living space is only 12 feet high at the bottom, while an 8-foot void remains above. Smoke from the hearths rises naturally, accumulates in this upper space, then slowly escapes through the vents. At this high level, the smoke layer acts like a thermal blanket, keeping the air below warm and insulating the living area from the cold roof. This smoke layer is not merely tolerated. It was deliberately factored into the system's design and serves another purpose as well. Food preservation is crucial for surviving the winter. To get through the 6-month-long winter, A large volume of crops from the harvest must be stored. Corn, beans, and squash, the traditional three sisters of the Haudenosaunee people. These crops must be dried, processed, and stored to remain intact until spring planting. Dried corn is braided into long ropes, beans are kept in bark containers, and all are hung from the rafters within the smoky zone. Smoke preserves food. The chemicals in wood smoke inhibit bacterial growth and repel insects. By storing food in the constant flow of smoke, the Haudenosaunee transformed a ventilation problem into an effective preservation system. The haze inside the house, produced by smoke, also prevents food from spoiling. Ethnographic records confirm that the interior is very smoky, yet this is not a design flaw. Rather, it's a trade-off they were willing to make. The persistent discomfort from smoke is the cost of warmth and long-term food preservation. Respiratory health was sacrificed for immediate survival, as the harshness of the freezing winter left no other option. Heat generation relied not solely on fire. The Longhouse was designed to harness thermal energy from every available source, including its own inhabitants. With 20 to 30 families sleeping in close proximity, 60 to 100 human bodies radiate a substantial amount of heat. An adult at rest produces about 100 watts of thermal energy, equivalent to a glowing incandescent bulb. During the coldest months, 100 people generate 10,000 watts, comparable to the output of a small space heater. Families deliberately maximize this effect by sleeping huddled together around the hearth pit. Body heat became a continuous passive supplement to the fire. The circular roof shape amplifies heat retention through convection. Warm air rises to the peaked roof. The rising air accumulates and stagnates at the apex, forming a hot zone much higher than the living space. The barrel vault changed this. As warm air near the fires rises, it moves toward the curved ceiling. It follows the curve back down toward the outer walls, creating a circulation loop. Heat does not escape to dead zones. It continuously circulates within the occupied space. The bark cladding inherently offers minimal insulation compared to thick earthen or stone walls. The survival strategy did not rely on preventing heat loss. It relied on generating heat faster than it escapes. It also controls the rate of heat loss through controlled ventilation. The system operates on continuous input rather than stored thermal mass. The floor plan reflects this thermal logic. A 10-foot-wide central hallway serves both as a fire break and the main passage. 5-foot-long raised platforms run along each wall, protruding 1 foot above the compacted earth floor. This height is important because cold air sinks. The floor is the coldest part of the house. If you sleep directly on the ground, your body loses heat through conduction into the frozen earth. A 1-foot gap creates an insulating layer of air. On the platforms, fur mats provide extra insulation against the cold. These platforms serve 3 functions. By day, they are used as benches for sitting and working. At night, they become elevated beds, with the space underneath used to store firewood. Storing firewood under the sleeping area keeps it dry and within easy reach. The heat radiating from nearby fires gradually dries the moisture in the wood, making it burn efficiently when needed. Directly above the sleeping platforms, a long shelf runs along each wall. This is the area for personal belongings, clothing, tools, and miscellaneous items. However, the main storage space is vertical. The beams running along the upper third of the structure are used for hanging items: braided corn, bags of beans, dried fish, herbs, all the essentials to sustain the community until spring. This vertical storage makes full use of the ceiling height, while keeping items out of reach of pets and small children. At its core, this architecture is a container, and the living space is designed around heating and preservation systems, not the other way around. The unique length and height of the Longhouse stem from the need to store 6 months' worth of resources for dozens of people. The purpose is not to provide comfortable, spacious living quarters. The social structure extends to the organization, with each 20-foot compartment accommodating 2 families, both matrilineal. Under the matrilineal kinship system, when men marry, they move into their wife's Longhouse, and children belong to the mother's clan. The mother's clan holds authority over the Longhouse. The head woman of the extended family, that is to say, the clan mother, is the common residence. The clan mother manages household affairs, from distributing food and assigning tasks to maintaining social order within the house. She also holds power in the political sphere. The men in the Longhouse, when attending the council, represent their clan. However, it is the clan mother who selects the men to take on the role of representatives. Political power originates from the space within the Longhouse. The architecture is not coincidentally linked to this social organization. The Longhouse structure accommodates that nurturing an extended matrilineal family requires space for multiple generations to live under one roof. Thanks to the modular design of the two 0-foot compartments, the Longhouse can expand as the family grows. When a daughter marries, her compartment is expanded or a new section is added to the existing house. With this flexibility, the architecture easily adapts to changes in population. The Longhouse is also a symbol containing the identity of the clan. Each Haudenosaunee clan has a representative totem from an animal or bird, turtle, bear, wolf, or hawk. Typically, the clan symbol is hung outside the Longhouse, identifying it as the territory of that kinship group. Inside the house, all residents share a common clan identity. If you belong to the Bear clan, then all the people living in that Longhouse are considered family. The combination of kinship structure, power, and architecture form the foundation of the Haudenosaunee political system. The first 5 member nations of the Confederacy, the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca, were envisioned as a great longhouse stretching across the entire land. The Mohawks settled in the east and took on the role of guarding the eastern door. The Seneca occupied the western region and became the protectors of the western entrance. These nations guarded the Confederacy's borders, much like the two end walls of an actual longhouse sheltered the interior space from the weather. The Onondaga controlled the land in the center. They became the keepers of the central council fire and the wampum, the symbolic hearth around which the other nations gathered to deliberate. Their position corresponded to the location of the central hearth in a household longhouse, where people came together to make decisions and keep warm. However, this was not merely a poetic metaphor. It was a political architectural model expanded from the domestic sphere to the territorial level. The efficiency of the collective survival model. Multiple households sharing fire and space, managing common resources, and operating under a matrilineal system. That success created a template for organizing diverse nations, and the architectural type became embodied in the form of government. The Great Law of Peace, the founding document of the Confederacy, Dachshunds, organized the decision-making process based on this longhouse framework. The Mohawk, Seneca, and Onondaga were considered the elder brothers, while the Cayuga and Oneida were the younger brothers. Every decision required consensus between the two groups, reflecting balance between the two sides of an actual longhouse, where families on opposite walls shared a central hearth. Many researchers believe that this participatory governance model influenced later democracies, including some elements in the United States Constitution. Whether or not it had such a direct influence, the principle endures. The Haudenosaunee established a political system that reflected their practical experience with shared architecture. The Longhouse taught them how to organize on a broader scale. The construction work was collective. Men felled trees, carved posts, bent rafters, and fixed the frame. Women prepared the bark panels and managed the interior layout. Children helped gather raw materials, and the entire village took part. To build a 200-foot longhouse required the coordination of dozens of workers and the use of hundreds of saplings and bark panels. The construction also had to be completed during the short building season of spring before the sap stopped flowing. This required planning, leadership, and synchronized effort skills that transferred directly to other collective activities such as warfare, hunting, and diplomacy. Maintenance was performed regularly, and the bark panels gradually deteriorated due to weather exposure. The outer surface, subjected to constant erosion from rain, snow, and sun, became thinner and cracked over time. When the bark on the roof became too old to use, it was moved down to the walls, which were less directly exposed. When the bark on the walls eventually deteriorated, it was replaced with new panels. Old wood was reused. Broken canoe bottoms, broken tool parts, and any usable materials were incorporated into repairs. This closed-loop material system was extremely important. Villages could not easily relocate because agriculture was tied to fixed fields, but local forest resources, including firewood and building materials, gradually became depleted. Extending the lifespan of each timber delayed the eventual need to abandon the site and rebuild elsewhere. Archaeological evidence shows that villages relocated every few decades when firewood became scarce and soil fertility declined. The Longhouse was not a permanent structure in the sense of being built of stone. It was semi-permanent, sturdy enough to last for decades, but designed to eventually be abandoned and rebuilt. The Longhouse form was not unique to the Haudenosaunee. Similar structures appeared in many cultures and periods, wherever groups of people needed shelter for extended families in harsh climates. Viking longhouses spread across Scandinavia and Iceland. Like the Haudenosaunee version, they housed large family units gathered around a central hearth. However, the materials differed. Viking longhouses used stone foundations, timber walls, and in Iceland, where wood was scarce, roofs were turf-covered. Similar geometry, long and narrow, communal in nature, but with specific adaptations to available materials and local climate. Neolithic communal houses in Europe also followed the same principle. In Borneo, wet rice farming communities built longhouses up to hundreds of feet long, sheltering entire villages under one common roof. The prevalence of this house type proves it is the ideal solution for a stable collective lifestyle. By pooling resources, sharing warmth, and connecting kinship groups under one roof, core survival issues are resolved, regardless of geography. The subtlety of the Haudenosaunee system is not the rectangular shape, but its adaptability in materials. By using flexible saplings, bark wall cladding, and pliable ties, construction required minimal tools like axes and adzes, yet achieved high speed. To work heavy timber frames, the Norse had to use saws, drills, and skilled carpentry. The Haudenosaunee built from regenerating forest materials, harvested annually. This efficiency extended to temperature regulation. Unique to the northeastern woodlands was the smoke screen system, both ventilating and preserving food. The Vikings vented smoke through roof holes but did not integrate it into a preservation plan. The Haudenosaunee transformed the nuisance of smoke into a storage solution. The Longhouse is not just a building, it is a living identity. European colonizers disrupted traditional settlements. Physical forms disappeared from many areas, yet cultural values persisted. Today, communities like the Nez-Wawash Band of Indians still use architecture called longhouses as ceremonial and cultural centers. The Handsome Lake religion. In the early 19th century, a spiritual movement emerged and made the longhouse its sacred gathering place. Though the physical form has changed, modern Haudenosaunee identity remains tied to this concept. The Confederacy calls itself the Longhouse. The political apparatus built centuries ago still functions. The Onondaga still keep the wampum belts, the historical records of the Confederacy, and convene the Grand Council. This metaphor endures because of its effectiveness. The architectural structure was so successful that it became a model for organizing communal life, outlasting the buildings themselves. The remnants are a testament to wisdom applied to the struggle for survival. Facing 6 months of harsh cold, the Haudenosaunee used tools made of wood, bark, and stone. They designed a structure that provided warmth, stored food, controlled smoke, preserved provisions, and accommodated multiple extended families. Building materials were renewable resources harvested from sustainably managed forests. Labor was organized collectively, and buildings were maintained through regular repairs and recycling. The system operated efficiently because each element served multiple functions. Smoke was both vented and retained. Raised platforms used for storage. Bark served as insulation and weatherproofing. Efficient architecture does not come from complex technology, but from integrated design where each part simultaneously solves multiple problems. The Longhouse shows that sophistication does not require advanced materials, but a deep understanding of the environment. By utilizing available resources and designing a system that balanced opposing needs, the Haudenosaunee built with wood and bark, what was readily available from the forest. They mastered that material to such an extent that structures lasted decades and cultural foundations endured for centuries. Throughout the icy months, families slept warm. Smoke drifted overhead, corn hung from the rafters, fires burned in outside hearths. The winter was harsh, but inside life continued. The Longhouse was not just a shelter, it was a survival tool, a social blueprint, and a political ideology. The whole was made of bent saplings and bark sheets, connected by knowledge passed through generations. The inhabitants of the Longhouse lived up to their name.